It's time for matcha talk.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum. So I am in my very comfy spot, also in the new place, which one day you guys will see. Today is just a podcast, but Samati, are you in your comfy little spot?
Yes, and in my comfiest clothes as well, actually. I have a really comfy. Like I'm like not working comfy right now. So it is really very good. And actually, everyone, we have a really awesome episode for you today. And it is a new fun episode, and we've never had guests before. So this is super exciting. But it is not like a regular guest episode because we have the Modern Skeptic podcast guest with us, Malak and Mariam. And we got together over Instagram because we have a mutual love of books and reading books. And the Modern Skeptics on there have a bookgram in which they read a book every month and then they review it and give it a star rating, and they don't care what that feels like. It's true and brutal, and I just love that. And so they approached us and they were like, let's read a book together. And we came up with a book, which was My Past is a Foreign Country by Zebat Al-Khani. And so if you go out to their podcast on Instagram, we're going to have a live discussion that's actually happening today. So you can join us over there. And over here, we're going to do some topics from the book, and we're going to go on matcha talk on it. We're just going to get personal and we're going to discuss those things. And I'm sure that you guys are going to find it relatable. So Malak and Mariam, welcome to Matcha Talk. Yay!
Hey everyone, we're so honored to be here.
Honestly, it's we're so honored that we're your first guest on your podcast. I know, Samia, you have been following our bookgram from your personal page, Sunnah Living, and we love having your comments on our bookgrams, and we love seeing what your thoughts on the books are, and kind of just following along. It's always so fun. But yeah, so I'm Malak,
I'm Mariam.
and we are two of the co-hosts on the podcast, The Modern Skeptics. So we thought it was fun. We both love to read so much. We thought, why not in this COVID and pandemic time to kind of get together, choose a book every month, and just let everybody read along, have a good time and try to pass the time, I guess.
A way to keep us connected too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and reading books is always something that people can just get together over.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us something about your podcast. Tell us what do you guys do? What is your podcast about? And all that good stuff.
And links and all the hashtags and things.
Okay, so you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Modern Skeps. We upload full-length episodes both on the podcast app on your phone and actually on YouTube. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up. You can tune into all our episodes on YouTube. But I guess the really quick gist of The Modern Skeptics is we are four young, I'd like to use the term young.
Young.
Young
Yeah.
Muslim Palestinian American women trying to find our way just like everybody else, And oftentimes we found that when we were tuning in on social media, when we were turning on the news, there was always, Muslims are always there, and it's always somebody else telling our narrative. And we are the type of girls that we like to discuss everything. We have an opinion on everything. We come from different fields of education. We have a doctor, we have a lawyer, we have a social worker, and inshallah, a future dentist. And basically what we do is we try to draw from our personal experiences and our opinions on everyday matters. We just like to voice what we do. We like to kind of give our take on solutions, on problems. And our intention of putting this podcast together was that we wanted to learn from people and we wanted people to learn from us. So as we're growing up and we're becoming part of the workforce and we're getting our education and we're becoming older and juggling our responsibilities as Muslim, as women, as, future spouses, as siblings, as daughters, how have we gotten to where we are so far, and how do we hope to continue? So,
yeah. It's also like, because we draw from our personal experiences, and a lot of people don't talk about certain things that happen to them, to know that there's comfort in, this person also experienced this. This person also thought about that in this certain light. So also to just shed light on certain topics that aren't naturally talked about or you don't usually think to talk about.
Right. It's getting really into like cultural experiences as well, which is something that we really talked about in this book. So I think this was a great introduction into getting into those little topics. So should we jump right in, Summer?
Yeah, let's go. So, one main thing that y'all have already actually touched on is being Muslim woman in this world that we're living in. So I have definitely had issues with that. I'm moving up in my company and dang, it's tough. It is tough being a woman, and then it's tough being a Muslim woman too, right? Especially everything's on video, everything's in person. Otherwise, you can't hide the scarf, hijab, everyone knows who you are. So I've definitely had some issues with that. And one of the biggest themes in the book was feminism, like how to navigate the world. So I wonder what kind of experiences that you have had, and maybe we can kind of go from there. So any particular struggles that you might have experienced in your life?
Well, I know I recently mentioned this on our podcast too, but I had this experience in law school where because I wear the scarf, one of my professors assumed I was an international student. So she would
Oh
speak to me
no.
as if like I didn't understand English naturally. And you always have this in my head going into a courtroom where are they going to stigmatize me based off my hijab? This is just an additional hurdle
Right.
that I have to overcome versus trying to represent my client.
So has that happened to you before?
Right.
Like has clients come up to you and said, like, come up to you with already a perception that you're gonna approach the case a certain way?
No, that hasn't happened, but it's more of obviously you don't know if the jury's going to be racist or biased against you because you don't speak to them directly, but it's always like a background thought in
Hmm.
your head. Like, are these people racist? And honestly, I have a little bit of privilege being in Chicago where they are more exposed to the Muslim community. We do have a thriving like presence here, so it isn't as bad as other communities that are more sheltered.
I really do feel that when you're talking about that little vibe in the back, like I think that's just what we carry with us all the time. It's like wherever we go, it's just like this little, oh yeah, I don't know how that person is perceiving me right now.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think, especially as women that do wear hijab, it's just like you said, it's something that we kind of have to deal with every day, right? So it's so easy for us to kind of just be like, I know I've had this conversation dozens of times with friends and with family members, and we always differ on the fact that people always say, well, hijabis shouldn't be held accountable for portraying the image of Islam, or we shouldn't be held to a different standard just because we wear hijab. And
Right.
although I can see where that argument stems from or can agree to that, I feel like it's very naive for us to think like you can go out in hijab and you can act a certain way or you can do certain things and people aren't just gonna assume it comes from Islam. So
Mm.
not only does it happen in our education or in our work, it literally happens when we're doing daily tasks, when we're going shopping, when we're going to parties, anything that you do and you happen to wear hijab, which I know this was something that the character in the book kind of struggled with. Like she had mentioned hijab multiple times and just other girls wearing hijab in the book, but it's just something that we do have to recognize and we do have to deal with every day.
That's a really good point. I sometimes I feel that I want to own the other opinion where like I just want to do what I want. You can't tell me. But yeah, the reality is that we do represent ourselves in a certain way.
Hmm.
I think we were talking about it a little earlier, Samiabaji, but I mean, from Florida, I really struggle with that a lot. Is like, I have to represent Islam. I always have to be the epitome as best as I can. So, because people are looking at me and that's what they're seeing. They're not seeing Summer, they're seeing, oh, this is a Muslim woman. So, moving up, I'm actually now in Washington, and people here are different. They're not very open and honest as they are in Florida, but that kind of undercurrent, I mean, is still there. And regardless of if you're Muslim or not, at the end of the day, you're still a woman, right? So I was younger in Florida and I actually wasn't able to notice too much kind of where women stand down there. I definitely saw, how women are, excuse me, how Muslim women are seen. But up here in Washington, as I'm growing up and, seeing the business world a little bit, oh, it's definitely apparent. So, I mean, It's like, and this was something in the book as well, where women were restricted due to the rules of the society that they were in. So now, right now, like I said, I'm in Washington, and that restriction is still here. But kind of the both examples that I just stated, where it was still in the West. I don't know how things are, around the world. And the book was, it definitely mentioned that a little bit. It was a bit of an insight on that. So I'm curious about the cultures that you guys know. So we're from Pakistan, so we know a little bit about, that subcontinent. What about you guys? You said you're from Palestine. What have you seen from there? And, especially rules of society, some things that should technically be possible to do as a woman, as a Muslim woman.
I definitely resonated with some of the things that she was saying because I know she's the character in the book is Indian and she was writing from her cultural background, but I feel like funny enough that some of the ideologies and some of the expectations are just the same across the board, right? So she was constantly talking about
Yeah.
how she wanted to further her education and how her mom was always concerned with like, oh, how's that gonna affect your marriage ability? You know, how are people gonna think that you're moving away from home to get educated? Or, those are things that I think our community has gotten significantly better in, but it's definitely something that we will continue to work on, right? So we've made strides, but we still have ways to go in terms of allowing our girls to kind of fully flourish. But personally, alhamdulillah, I would have to say I'm pretty privileged in that aspect because my parents are very gun ho on like education and being successful. So they're very pro. If you have to go out of school, out of state, like you go and you pursue your career. Like this is the point of your in your life where you worry about your education, you worry about success, and then inshallah, the rest will follow. But I definitely have, I think, peers and I know girls that I've gone to high school with where their parents are kind of like, it's really not necessary or, you can find education here. There's no need for you to have to continue your education further from home.
I think we all share a very unique perspective because not only are we like a minority, but we also are a minority in America. So I feel like a lot of our perspectives, regardless of if I'm from Palestine or you're from Pakistan or from India, there's a lot of things that as a minority in America we share,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to familial ties, how there's a very different perspective in the American world versus minority culture world. I feel like as a minority, it's so much more of what is the family doing as a whole versus what I'm doing independent.
Yeah, the one of the things also was the patriarchal thing in this book, right? And there was one phrase she said which really stuck to me, and she was like, "Woman policing woman." And she described an instance where the whole I forgot exactly what it was, something similar to that she got like a wound, or I think yeah, she got a wound or something, or from a hot spoon or something like that, and her mom disciplined her or something, and then her dad came home and she kind of told on her mom, and then she mentioned the woman policing woman, where we're always like making sure that the other woman is somehow not comfortable where she is, like she's always on guard at all times. And I really related that. Like I think it is a lot over here, like in our Pakistani culture, where there's a lot of that. It's like, oh, or we can see that in the hijabi culture as well. A person is not wearing hijab a certain way, and then they're like, oh, that's not okay. You're not Muslim enough. You're not woman enough. You're not hijabi enough. So tell us a little bit about like your experiences with that. Have you seen anything when it comes to your culture or your experiences?
I definitely think that you always have people that'll go around and tell you what you're doing isn't enough, right? Whether it be your religiosity, whether it be you being a woman, a mother, a sister, a daughter, you'll never make everybody happy. And that's just the bottom line. And I'd like to say that I don't think we see it so much anymore. Like I feel like as the generations continue to live in America, maybe we saw that more with like first generation, which I felt like was the character in the book. She was writing about the 70s, the 80s, so she was more first generation, even though she was still in India and Germany, like she was in other countries, but for her, it was a lot of first experiences and she was the first daughter. So she was going through a lot of experiences that I felt like I think my mom would resonate with. Like things that the culture that she was growing up in, the expectations that she was growing up with, they were very, I would compare it to like old Arab mentality, right? So, um, just the expectation and the getting married really young and maybe education isn't necessarily at the forefront. I felt like that was something that the older generation struggled a little more with. I honestly can't say I've personally struggled with that, but I I've seen firsthand where people say, "Oh, you're not doing this right, so why are you bother doing it at all?" You know, like, and maybe not to me directly, but to friends or to people that I've been with in public at the masajid, like your shirt maybe is too short. How are you wearing that in the masjid? Like, have some, be conservative, be wary of where you are.
No, going to your point with the woman policing women, I just find it very interesting how when they are going to complain, they complain to like they know the power dynamic that works and then use it to their advantage to complain about something. For instance, like you mentioned, oh, she's seen her mother doing something that she didn't like, so she complained to the father, like to try and reprimand in some sort of way, or that there's consequences for their actions. And that's really disappointing to see. And I feel like a lot of people that are older now, or as children, I don't think you realize the pressure that you put on a marriage early on by doing those actions. Because I definitely remember like me going and complaining to like my mom about my dad or my dad about my mom as a child, not realizing like what
The ripple
would happen
effect.
or what would be the cause of it, but just knowing, oh, mom, dad did this, or dad, mom did this, ha ha ha, like thinking it's funny, but not really realizing that it's not.
I'm actually really refreshed by that because you both are mentioning that that is something that was happening back then. But like I know people right now who are like living that. And I mean, they happen to be from our background in the South Asian background. I'm not sure how that works out. Like, yeah, there is an emphasis on education, but I still feel that there's that expectations to hold them back, you know? Like how she mentions in that book where, the woman in Saudi Arabia in this case, they couldn't do certain jobs because they were just not able to get that education. That's not a place they could go to. And I feel like even though like we're in the West here and like I've been growing up and living here for 20 something years, there are people here who still have the same things. And that really frustrates me because I'm like, I thought we were over this. So I was reading this book and I'm like, wow, like this is happening now still.
I agree. And actually, something that you've kind of made me remember is also sometimes, like you mentioned, although we may be further in encouraging education and pushing girls to be educated and to be independent, there's always that idea also. You may be offered education or you may be encouraged to be educated, but you're also expected to withhold your chores at home and to be a good wife and to be a dutiful daughter and to be still like it's not so much as in like we're trading. It's like, okay, fine, you want to get educated. This is more to your plate. Like you can get educated and we're encouraging education, but just keep in mind that your expectations as a good wife, as a good daughter, as a good mother, like they're still your priority and they're still at the forefront and maybe at the expense of your education.
It sounds like what you're saying is, and I relate to this 100%, is that yes, you can educate yourself, but don't forget you're gonna get married and have your own place later on.
Yeah.
That's your goal. That's who you're gonna be. So educate yourself and have fun while you can,
Yeah.
sure.
But I think also within ourselves, we like want to be a good mom and we want to be a good wife, and but we also want to get our education. So it's always this constant balancing act that not only society puts on us, but I think we put in ourselves.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm,
think that's
mm-hmm.
a result of the societal expectations for women in general. And that has been the case here in the West too, where they were like, oh, wearing your proper perfect dress while doing your laundry, like those images that we see from like 80s or something, right? It's quite something. So the other thing that they talked about, y'all just touched on that, was marriage. Marriage was a huge deal. It was like an overarching thing where they kept on telling her, oh my God, you need to get married. How are you going to get married with your hair loss? How are you going to get married with this? And I actually asked a friend. She's a mixture of Indian and Pakistani background. And I was like, hey, this one was almost oppressive. I haven't seen anything like this. Like I know we have a pressure on getting married, but I felt the person in this book, like she had like this, I don't know, she just felt like what is it called, like buried by that. So like how is it in yours? Like did you find that it was okay, yeah, I've heard this before, or was this like too much?
No, I've definitely heard that before. A marriage is always something that's like over everybody's mind, and it's kind of like, when is it gonna happen? When are you gonna do it?
I think she experienced it a little more because she was still back home, what we consider back home in the Western world, you know?
I
So
think the pressure though is here too.
I
I
do,
don't think it's different just because
I think the
we're in different countries.
I think the pressure of marriage and by a certain age is definitely still instilled in our communities today, whether it be Arab culture or not. Like, I mean, we hear it from the girls around us our age, you know, we're right in that age in our early to mid 20s. So we're just around that age where people are starting to ask, you know, marriage, what are your thoughts on marriage? When do you plan on getting married? But I felt like hers was overwhelmingly because her whole community also, like from what I learned from the book, in the Indian community, you can pay people to set you up. Like, there, between the rishtas, the marriage proposals, like families get involved and you can get third parties involved. Like, Arab cultures, you don't really hire a matrimony or like a matchmaker to find you a spouse if you've gotten to that point. So like reading that was really interesting to me because it's like this is really emphasized in her culture, and she was struggling with trying to get educated and get married, and then the constant reminder that, oh my god, because of the problem she was having with her hair, she's never gonna find the perfect guy, or she'll never be worthy in the community's eyes of having a perfect guy.
One of the quotes that hit me from that book was when the mom said, you should just accept him because
Mm-hmm.
you have hair loss anyway. Like, this is the best you're gonna get with what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then she mentions how much that hurt her.
And how awful that guy was, right? Like, he was quite arrogant.
Yeah, it's like, this is the best you're gonna get, so you should be happy. And you always kind of have that too here. Like, okay, well, this person proposed to me or wants to get to know me for marriage. Should I say no because he doesn't meet all my standards? And then you have, am I being too picky? Am I thinking about this?
Mm-hmm.
Is he the only one that's gonna ask? So I should take that into account. So you have that fear also playing in your head.
Yeah, no, it's so unfortunate that I understand what you're saying because I've seen it in the Pakistani dramas and things. I know, Semaji, you just have a thing against them. And, you know, maybe you're right, you know.
I do.
But this is something that they say, especially if there's something wrong, in quotation marks, with the woman. It's kind of like, well, just take whatever's offered to you. Beggars can't be choosers. You know, yeah, sure, he has 3 kids that are your age, but that's fine. This is the only choice you have to get married, which is your end goal and purpose in life. So just deal with it. And that's so unfortunate that even while we're not in that society still, we kind of still are, because those are the values that our parents grew up with and they are instilling in us, which up to a point is fine. I think you guys mentioned a little bit earlier, if we can backtrack just a little bit, about parents and immigrants. So, for example, our parents, or parents in general, they struggle with their own identity, you know, when they're immigrants. They have kind of their home culture, like you said. And then kids struggle too, because at home they have a different culture, but they go outside in the Western world, right? Or they go to school and everybody's talking about different things and eating different food and all of that. But, and then in the book, the mom is kind of, you know, following that same cultural crisis or identity crisis. She doesn't really quite know, you know, what's going on with that. And then for us personally, like our parents as well were Pakistani, and that's kind of who they are. My mom, our mom, she never learned English. She, to this day, lived here for 20 years, didn't learn a lick of English, and she's fine with that. She was happy with that. She chose to do that. But the culture that we grew up with was the same. So today, my mom asks me, when are you getting married? I'm like, Ma, I don't know. It's not on my to-do list, but it's on hers, you know, it's on hers. So she grew up with that, and she's trying to instill that in us, which is fine. But I think the negative things, I just wish some of those negative things or the overbearing things, values, were kind of taken away, or they weren't instilled, or they weren't focused on as much as they are. And that's why
you have to fight against that. Like, I got married to a person outside of our culture, and that was like a 6-year battle, you know, like you could label it as a battle if you want. And it is so weird because every time someone hears about that, they just nod, you know, oh yeah, I totally get you. And I'm like, why is everyone still nodding about this completely normal, acceptable thing where you just like finding someone outside of your culture and then they're like sympathizing you. Oh, I can totally understand how hard that is for you. So I think in order to break that, you literally have to fight it. Like it literally, and in the book that she fought it, she was like, no, I'm going to go study, I'm going to do what I want to do. So you have to like just, unfortunately, it is a battle. And I think that's the only way to get out of that.
Yeah, I know that, like you had mentioned, our parents do come. So personally, my mom was born and raised here. So half of my parental team, my mom, she's here, she studied here, she speaks perfect English. But my father was raised in Kuwait, and then he was here. He came here at a very young age. He's lived in America longer than he hasn't lived in America, right? But there are still those kind of ideologies you had to lose, I guess, or to find a common ground. Like coming to America, it's impossible to live exactly the way you live back home. It's just not going to happen. And they originally came here to have better opportunities for themselves and for their children. So as our parents have their own internal fights, like what should I be pushing on my children? What should I let go of in order to allow my children to have a better future? There's also us like having our own internal battles where we're like, what should we be holding on to and what should we be pursuing? And there was actually a quote in the book where she was saying, oh, I'm too Muslim in India, but I'm too brown in like Britain or Germany, where she's like, I never quite fit in anywhere. And I think that resonates with us a lot too, because I mean, besides the whole hijab, Palestinian, I'm personally a tanner color, like minorities stick out in a crowd. So when we're back home, everybody knows that we're American. And when we're here, everybody knows that we're not American, quote unquote. Like we don't belong here. Our ancestors aren't from here. So I think that's something that is also across the board. You'll never feel like you fit in anywhere 100% as a minority.
Yeah, we were talking about that just yesterday, Summer, because we were like, "Hey, what would we like to go visit back home, like Pakistan and whatever?" And I was like, the idea is the expectation is that everyone speaks the same language, we all eat the same foods, and we'll be fine. But we're not. We're going to be outsiders because
Nope.
Yeah. And I think maybe
You're
there's a
always
wisdom
an
behind
outsider.
that. I think maybe there is something that's good behind it. Maybe, maybe this is an opportunity for us to not make this world a home at the end of the day, Maybe just not get too comfortable anyway. Just be like, and even within our own circles, sometimes we stick out. When I went back to Pakistan that was like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. I was the only one who was wearing a hijab at that time. My hijab wasn't proper. I was just starting up, and and I just remember people just attacking me for it. They're like, you don't have to wear the hijab. We're just cousins. You can just take it off, whatever. And I was like, I get all this negativity here. Like, you get that here. But I was like, why am I getting it there? Why do I need to defend my choice to wear hijab there? So it's that like there's no leg that you can totally stand on. And I find like there's some spiritual lessons to be taken from that.
That's why I say a lot of the times
I
when
think
it
that's
comes
beautiful.
to comparing your ancestral mentality to minority in America's mentality, I feel like we, even though we have different backgrounds and ethnic wise, we have so much shared experiences and similarities because we know how different we are, but we also share the same like
Yes.
American rule in trying to balance that. So we understand our own struggles that we have. I have a funny story. I actually went to Palestine a couple of years ago, and I didn't realize how different we do things between here and there. Like I just never realized the differences until I actually went there, or even just the differences in my Audible. Like I didn't think my Audible sounded weird, but I went there and they're like, please don't talk because
You
they're
have
gonna
an
get
accent.
overcharged. Yeah, walk peacefully. You might have a chance. Even the way you wrap your
Oh my
scarves
gosh.
is so different.
Overcharged.
Or like the clothing style choices. Like you don't realize there are very different things when you cross over there.
Countries.
Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine it. I don't think I experienced it, but I can imagine it. Like you can stand out. Oh yeah, this is an American coming in.
Yeah. Like your American dialect and speaking
think-
Audible, the way you put your scarf, the shoes that you have. Like there's just so many differences because those shoes aren't popular in Palestine. So like I don't know why you're wearing them.
It's like you have to wear knockoff Gucci. Why aren't you? Come on now. Like, hello. And you're like, but these
Riding the
are real.
trend.
No, I think one thing that we can do, and a lesson learned from the book perhaps, is kind of making sure that we don't take that to our kids. You know, our parents took it on us. We learned that from them. And I think we can just filter it and make sure it doesn't go on to the next generation, those kinds of negative. It's not all about fashion, you know, or it's not all about you're a woman, you have to get XYZ skill set and this is what you have to do in the future. Or if you're a man, this is what you have to do XYZ in the future. Just kind of make sure that, you know, be that we're generous to our own parents, because one day we're gonna be in the same shoes where our kids are kind of like, mom told me to do this and she, you know, pushed this kind of value on me. I wish she never did that, you know.
You know, I actually admire that about Zeba, because even though that she had all this stuff like she did with her parents, like she still dedicated the books to her parents, and she's like, oh, you know, she has a good relationship with them, and I felt like I don't know if she used the word forgiveness or not, but I felt like she's forgiven that little, you know, distance that she had between her and her mom. She still mentions that she's not emotional. I think it was an interview or a podcast interview I heard of her later. And she was like, you know, there's still that distance. So she doesn't talk to me as much, like she mentioned in that book a few times. But then, I don't know, I felt like she's so good with that. Like sometimes I feel, I'm like, oh my God, I kind of still have a little bit of like, you know, like feelings of annoyances towards what my parents do or have done because of their background. But I think she just got over it, and I just really admire that.
I think there is some things though I did kind of disagree with her in the book a little bit. Well, not that I thought she should have been more appreciative in a certain sense, like when her father went to Germany with her for the first time, or when he went with her to her new school for the first time. She's like, man, I wish I was more independent and they didn't come with me. Like, you're kind of looking at it negatively because they love you so much, and you're going to a new country, experiencing a new thing, and for them it's such an odd element, you know, because their safety is one of their biggest concerns. Like, as a parent, you want your kid to stay safe. So imagine having to send them to a different country completely, where you have no ties, where you can't save them essentially if something happens. That's hard. So the fact that you're gonna complain for like a page about how your dad took you to this new country, like, I'm not gonna agree with you there.
But wasn't that excessive though? Like calling every 10 minutes? Like, what was that deal? There was one scene in the store.
No, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. There was where it's like, okay, Dad, I'm out. Why do you really have to call me for the 20th time? But I wish you would have took it as he loves me so much that he's checking on me.
I think
even though it's annoying.
I think in hindsight, she realized, like, you know, this was love, this was admiration, this was nervousness, anxiousness. But I also agree with Mariam. I think there were some elements of the book where I kind of disagree with, or I specifically enjoy those parts in life, right? So of course there are negatives. I don't want to say negatives, there are differences in opinion when we have with our parents, you know, we're grown up in a different society, we have different expectations. But I do think that there's a beauty and an importance in a lot of the values that her parents were showing and in culture, right? So there are a lot of things that growing up we're like, why do we have to do this? This doesn't make any sense. And then in hindsight, we appreciate those values, and those are things that I hope I can instill in my children. And for some people, it's still, oh, that's such a cultural or such a minority way of thinking of things, like such a back home way of thinking. But at the same time, there's beauty and importance in the values that our parents did bring to America with them, you know, and that goes into the whole, I think, identity crisis of trying to figure out what to keep and what not to keep. But there were a few instances where I was also like, you know, your parents are traveling around the world trying to find a cure for this hair loss. And I know it weighed so heavily on her, and she hated recognizing it because she felt like every time she would get over it, reminding her of her hair loss made her feel inferior, made her seem inferior. But at the same time, it was like, your parents are only constantly reminding you of it because they are trying so hard to make sure like you never feel inferior, or you yourself never feel like you're not enough in a crowd, you know.
I don't know how I feel about that statement because, okay, let's talk about that hair loss thing because that was one of her really big things. And, I mean, I felt like she never got, accepted for that by her parents. And she struggled and suffered so much because of that. And she's like going through all these treatments that her parents are paying for. It's expensive and stuff, but she's the one who's getting injections on her heads and getting all of those things. If her parents had only said, and one time she went to the doctor and she was like, I didn't think the doctor even knew what they were talking about. And so it's like, if the parents had given her that, hey, you know what? You're still loved. You're still beautiful. And she remembers that one instance where the mother said that to her and she just remembers it like that. But it just was like such a heavy thing on her. And I felt like if her parents had supported her through that and made her feel okay just as is, I think her suffering would be less.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand where you're coming from with that, but just I guess when I was reading, I mean, it's her experiences, and obviously we'll never feel the way she felt or suffer through the same, not suffer, go through the same experiences that she went through 100%. But I just felt like when I was reading it, I was just like, I understand where she's coming from and she's struggling and she's just had enough. But at the same time, we are we are an extension of our parents in a way. So her parents were just, I felt like they were just trying so hard because they wanted her to be so happy. And maybe for them, they thought that every time she thought of her hair loss, that she felt bad about it. Like they were trying to do everything in their power. They were calling relatives. They were crossing countries. They just wanted to do anything that they could to make sure that they felt like they did all that they could. Like they were trying to make strides.
I think something that would merge the two ideas into one is literally having the parents communicate with the child. And the child, I feel like in the book, they had a very
Yes.
hard time with communicating their love with one another and their affection with one another, which I also think is something that people still struggle with today, more culturally, and showing vulnerability towards one another. But I think her parents, it seemed, were doing it out of love and were doing the best that they could to put her in the best position of life. Because they didn't want her to settle for any guy and thought that if she had hair loss, she would have.
Yeah.
I feel like if they just communicated with each other, which is a problem a lot of people still have,
Yeah.
that it would have merged both of their feelings into one, and she would have felt supported, and she would have felt loved, and they would have felt like they're doing good for her.
Yeah, because I felt like if her parents didn't love her or didn't want to do the most they could do, they wouldn't have allowed her to further her education in so many different great experiences. Like even at that point where she wanted to, I believe it was studying in Germany, she wanted to pursue her last quarter in Germany, and her dad's like, no. And then she never had that relationship with her mom, but her mom was the one that called her and was like, do not say no to the position. Like, I'll work on your dad, like they did have faith in her. They just, I guess, wanted her to have the best of everything. And yeah, I guess that just came off as, her not feeling like she was adequate enough in their eyes, or at least in her mother's eyes. I know that was the recurring subject.
Yeah, I remember somewhere where she was putting makeup on her bald spots, and she would mention that, oh yeah, I'm doing this because I don't want to see my mother cry every time she sees me, and I just like imagine how that felt,
But she also said she did it when she went to school because she felt insecure about it.
Yeah, and then she would wear bandana and stuff and all those kind of things, and her relatives were really rude about that, like all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was all of that there, but I really do feel like, if you get that, and communication again, like that's the whole thing. And they probably did support her and they loved her, but it just didn't come across that way. When she's writing it come across as something, oh, I really struggle in accepting that about myself because no one around her who loved her seemed like they accepted it too.
Yeah.
I could appreciate though in the book where she was writing that as she grew up and as she kind of distanced herself from the people that she felt like were constantly limiting her, that she began to kind of like she isolated the idea of what societal beauty standards are and what actual beauty means. So she was able to, with her hair loss and with everything that she went through, once she distanced herself, she was able to see the beauty in every other part of her being besides the physical aspect, like the way she was, the relationships that she built and her personality and her intelligence. Like I did appreciate that about the book.
I feel like a lot of girls do that too, where if they're like, they don't feel like they're pretty, they'll try and harp up other aspects of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, okay, well, I don't have the beauty aspect naturally, so I'm going to be funny, I'm going to be so smart, I'm going to be so determined. Like, they feel like they have to be perfect in another sense if they're not naturally beautiful, quote unquote.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like a woman experience.
Y'all are touching on a subject where we were briefly talking about this, that so the hair loss was a huge thing in the book, and women today are just bombarded with beauty standards of all the kinds and all the sorts. But one thing I had trouble kind of relating to was the physical insecurity aspect, oddly enough, because it's something that, for example, I know women have issues, or I shouldn't say issues, but they have struggles with putting on the hijab. That was something for me. I was like, okay, let's do it. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. I was just, let's go for it. And as far as having any other physical insecurities, I'm like, yeah, I'm not no supermodel, and that's okay. Like, I'm kind of
Yeah.
very just blasé about it all. It's just something I couldn't quite understand, how people let their physical insecurities rule so much of their life. And it's not to say, for example, in my youth, I had a lot of acne on my face, but I wore the hijab and I was like, hey, my face is out there because I have that bigger priority, and it wasn't that big of a deal for me. So that's something I just personally could not relate to, was letting physical insecurities rule so much of my life, of my emotions, of my relationship with, for example, parents or anyone else or my friends or anything. If anyone mentioned anything about my physical anything, I was just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Sometimes it was really funny. I'm like, that's a good burn. But sometimes it's like, oh, it got to me for like an hour, and then I was like, yeah, all right. I mean, whatever, move on. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's just your personality. No.
Okay.
But because that's like a psychological thing, right? Like, that's just how you experience the world around you, and that doesn't affect you. Like, I know I did. Like, when I gained all that weight a long time ago, that really affected me. And now I'm like over on that part again, and I'm like, like remembering how that made me feel. But I'm just like constantly like, telling myself like that's not what I want to tell myself. That's what others want to tell to me, and I don't want to listen to that, So I feel like that's a struggle.
I think though, someone has a point to like a certain extent. Like, I can understand where as hijabis there are certain quotas we'll probably never meet, and it's just the way things are, right? So in the aspect of wearing makeup, sure, I wear makeup every day. I don't pack it on, but I do wear it and I do enjoy it. But in terms of going out in shorts and short skirts and tank tops or crop tops, like, I know that's a beauty standard I'll never experience as a hijabi, and that's just something I'm okay with and I'll have to live with. Like, you live and you learn from it. But yeah.
I think a lot of people go through insecurities about their looks.
Yeah.
It could be about anything. Like, you feel so great in the day, and you look in the mirror, and you have this huge zit that came out of nowhere, and you're like, okay, how do I cover this up? Like, do I really need to go to the grocery store? Can I wait a day? So it's always running through the back of your head, just because you know how heavily society values it. So you don't want to go in like being not weak in a sense, but having something against you before you even
Get a
have any
chance.
words, coming out of your mouth. Or someone goes, "Oh, she's ugly," or there is something called pretty privilege, and I totally believe in pretty privilege 100%. Where I've witnessed people that are extremely good looking get privileged based off of their good looks.
There are studies about it. Like, they get interviewed more often, they get accepted with a job more often. I think this is the time where I really feel hijab helped me. Like, I think hijab just put things into perspective. It's like, who cares, Like, makeup, no makeup, or, tight clothes, no tight clothes. Oh my God, this dress is beautiful, whatever, but not hijab friendly, so who cares about that? So I feel like it really puts things into perspective. And as a hijabi, I love hijabi life. I think it's great.
Honestly, I feel like hijab had a little bit of an opposite effect on me. Like, I feel like as a hijabi, I put in a little extra effort because I want them to associate hijab with cleanliness, with looking good, with like I just when you see hijab, I don't want people to think, oh, she's like sloppy. And that's just personally like how I feel, because like we had mentioned earlier, hijab, when people see hijab, they already have an idea of who you are, how you're gonna be, what you prioritize, what you don't prioritize. So I just feel like when I do choose clothing, of course I wanna please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time I wanna be a part of society. Like I want them to see clothing, I want them to associate hijabis with looking good in modest clothing, with you're always clean, you're hygienic, like just associate it with a really positive image.
Yeah, you're describing the sunnah though, right? Like that's just how we're supposed to be. We should not supposed to be sloppy and smelling bad, right? So in a way, you're like on point,
Yeah.
mashallah.
Oh, I mean, I'm far from perfect,
Right?
but
Well, when it comes from that,
Yeah.
like I think that's really true, and it's not only about how we present ourselves in the end. Like, yeah, we care about what other people think, but we also have to live in a way that is pleasing to Allah, and following the sunnah is part of it, and so that really helps.
I also liked in the story how Ziva made sure to mention that there are a lot of things that you grow up with, a lot of cultural stories that you hear, or cultural practices that you hear, that people have a tendency of making seem Islamic. And then when she got to that age where she was actually studying Islam, she's like, this is not one and one. Like these do not align. What God says, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Islam is significantly better and makes a lot more sense than some of the things that you grow up hearing. So I thought that was pretty cool.
There are so many things in Pakistan that people say, and it's mind-boggling, honestly, when you are just hearing that, and it's like, no, do you
Do you
remember
guys have this word? We
something?
have this word in Arabic. It's called da'im, which essentially means like shameful or whatever. But we use it. A lot of people use it synonymously with haram. So, oh, you can't do that. It's da'im. Or if they meant haram, or no, you can't do that. That's haram. And in reality, they meant ayam. Like,
Yeah, I do notice in the Arab culture the haram word is a lot more common.
Yeah,
yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
yeah, like it's used kind of very loosely.
Yeah. Do we have anything like
I
that?
mean, we
Sarah?
have we have the actual word, but it's not used like that in context.
Like we use sometimes the word haya, right? I think haya is sometimes used that way. Like
Oh,
they say, you
behaya,
should have
right.
sharmo haya, or you should be a little bit more modest or whatever. Like, and I think like it's taken to that extreme where haya means just lock yourself in a room rather than, like the actual meaning of it in an Islamic perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that was, yeah.
I feel like so imagine. I feel like there was something we had talked about before where it was something. It was seemed religious in Pakistan, but when we saw it from an objective point of view, we realized that was just full on. That was all culture, and it was actually really bad in hindsight. It was really, against women in that sense. But it was something everyone kind of said, and it was just like, yeah, I mean, that's how it is. That's just the reality.
What is,
Yeah, I don't remember.
I mean, I can think of like 1,000 things, honestly. Like, which one are you referring to?
I don't know which one I remember. We were talking about it a little while ago, but I mean, one of the 1,000. Go on, like if you can think of one.
Like something that, and this is really interesting because I'm able to see that with my husband, right? Because he's a convert and he's outside of our culture, and sometimes he will be like, see some Muslim countries or some Muslims do some things, and he'll be like, that doesn't make sense. Like he will literally be like, that just doesn't make sense. Like for him, he's able to recognize that. The one thing I remember, it was a Pakistani drama, and I was like, oh my god, it has subtitles. I want Hamza to watch it with me. Like I was really excited about it. I could not get past like the first episode. I couldn't do it. And then the lady just shows up, and she's not like in a hijab or like any sort of a modest way that you expect. And he was like, oh, what's going on? He's like, I thought, and I'm like, okay, you have issues. You think all the Muslim countries follow Islam perfectly, and women wear hijab because they want to. It's a choice, okay? But in the end, he was able to recognize, and sometimes we're not. And I think he's really helped me with that. He's like, well, that doesn't make sense. And now in the position that we're in our house, we can make a choice. Like, okay, do we want to follow this cultural practice, or we don't want to do it? And I feel like so free to say, oh yeah, we don't have to, because I don't have to answer to anybody. Like he's not expected to do it. So that has been really nice to be able to recognize and be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
I mean, there was one thing when you were talking about when you visited Pakistan and, you know, you were starting with the hijab and things. One thing definitely was kind of, yeah, you don't wear the hijab at home. Doesn't matter who's at home. Like, could be your male cousins. That's fine. But you're at home. You don't wear the hijab. What are you doing? And that was kind
There
of
was a
their
time,
understanding of Islam. And it's like, bro, like, you need to read about that.
yeah. There was a time I was sleeping. And this person, he was a male, just walked in and just like attempted to talk to me. And I was like, oh my God, I covered my face. And I was like, they were leaving, that was going to be the last conversation. I was like, yeah, okay, assalamu alaikum, Allah Hafiz, like leave, you know, like this is inappropriate.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping here. Oh, that was just something
But
else.
for them, that's Islam, apparently. I don't know. Do y'all have anything
Shocking.
in your culture like that where like it's in your culture, but people think it's Islam, but like, no, it's not.
Or people, I think people have this perspective that, like you were mentioning earlier, just because it's a Muslim country or majority Muslim country means that they follow Islam perfectly, and that's not the case whatsoever. I remember when we used to go, and I'm like, okay, we have to get up to pray. They're like, oh, ha, you're so religious. You're so religious for,
Oh my God.
what are you doing? And I'm like, we have to get up and pray Fajr. Okay? Like, we just have.
Or like you're getting too extreme.
Yeah, or
with
if you
some
say
of the words.
Assalamu alaikum instead of like salam, or
Alaikum.
like use the full word, they're like, whoa, okay, trying to flex on that.
Sheikha.
Exactly. And I'm like, I don't understand. I'm not computing here.
I think even women going to masajid when we had visited Jordan, I don't think it was like the masses of women didn't go to the masajid. Even I think it was the time of Eid and we're like, yeah, we're gonna go to the masjid in the morning and pray. And they're like we went and it wasn't like there was a lot more women here, yeah, that went to Salat al-Eid at the masjid than there was there. And we're kind of like, really? Like you guys have the adhan going all day and like you guys don't
Yeah.
go to the
I think it
masajid?
follows the line where, because it's not massively educated here in America, we have to go out and seek that knowledge ourselves. And because we get to seek that knowledge, and it's not like we have the idea, it's not like ingrained in what we know,
Mm-hmm.
that we get to experience Islam on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're able to seek that out. I had a similar experience when we went there. It really was an Eid al-Adha at that time. And people are preparing for it and whatever. And I just didn't feel part of the Eid because women don't go to the masjid. It wasn't even a thing. Oh yeah, they will go. And I remember I was eating oranges and I was like, oh, that's not a strange Eid to have in a Muslim country, right?
Yeah.
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 I
That
just
was a
feel
little
like
bit sad.
because we don't have it, we go out and look for it a lot more. And that brings up, okay, we know what's culture and we know what's religion, and we can see where they blend in more.
And we were grateful enough where we attended a private Islamic school growing up. So a lot of times the information was brought directly to us and then we were able to kind of ask questions as we went. So alhamdulillah, that experience has definitely shaped us into who we are today and our access to Islam. It's significantly different than even kids that we've grown up with that maybe have gone to public school, you know, or have gone kids from other countries. It's definitely gave us different experiences and different access to Islam.
I did disagree with something that she said in the book, though.
What?
I just remember this one line sticking out to me and not just sitting right at all. Because she was saying how Islam is all about interpretation. So you open the Quran and like you interpret it as you will. And I'm like,
Yeah, there were some instances where I'm like, not really practicing mentality was coming out from her experience, but I still appreciated her Muslimness.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like everybody's still growing on their Islamic journey. But I always have a problem when you say something definitively. Like Islam is this. Like you better make sure Islam is what you're saying it is if you're gonna say Islam is that.
Yeah.
So she's like, Islam is all about interpretation. You open the Quran and you take from it what you want. And I'm like, I don't think that's not right. That's not it.
No, that's what I was saying. I remember I was watching a video somewhere on YouTube, and this lady's like, oh, you know, she used to wear a hijab, and then she's like, I studied, I did my research, I went online, and I learned that I don't have to wear it, so I took it off, and I'm okay with it. I'm like, all right, like,
Okay.
that's your interpretation, right? Like, that's the danger about this all.
It's like on the one hand, it's good that there are Muslims writing books and are present in the book world. But on the other hand, like, are you sure you want to be making all these statements, without really being 100% sure, or making a sheikh read it first, being like, hey, can you check this?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like a good and bad. But I mean, alhamdulillah for
There
this
are
book,
things
though.
where you're honest with yourself. Where you're like, okay, this probably isn't the most Islamic thing, but like, I'm doing it right now and I should fix this. It's different than saying, no, Islam allows alcohol. No, like you're choosing to do it and you're wrong, but that doesn't mean Islam allows it. Like, don't try and ease your guilt by saying that,
Right.
like, Islam allows that certain thing, because I don't like that. That doesn't sit right with me. But I also, everybody's on their own journey in Islam. And if you want to say that's your journey at this point is to not wear hijab, that's different from saying Islam doesn't allow hijab.
Right.
Or doesn't
I agree on that
require it.
completely. Yeah, because I think we can never ever fall true to the Islamic standards, and we should be able to, be able to say that, be like, I know I'm failing at it, but I know what the reality is at the same time. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, this was a wonderful conversation, alhamdulillah. And look forward to the Instagram for the Modern Skeptics to do the discussion of this book, where I'm sure Mariam is going to have more disagreement. I can just feel it coming. It's going to happen. And I'm so grateful that you guys were able to come and join us for our podcast episode today. Thank you very much for stopping by and chatting with us.
Thank you so much for having us. We had such a great time.
Yes, we hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed recording.
Summer, any closing remarks?
No, I think that was fun, and I just want to say the name of the book again. It was, sorry, what was the name?
My past is a foreign country.
There we go. My past is a foreign country. There are a lot of themes in this book that a lot of people can relate to, I think. So just a shout out again to the book itself. I think it's a good read. So thank you for the Modern Skeptics for joining us on this podcast. It was a lot of fun, and I think I would love to hear from our viewers. What did you guys think? I thought it was a really fun podcast, a little different from what we usually do, having guests and talking about a book. Okay, so hashtag Matcha Talk, leave a review, say salams. There are so many ways for you to get in contact with us. So, Instagram, wherever you get your podcasts, on sunnaliving.com. There's so many ways. So communicate with us. Let us know what you thought.
Yeah, don't forget to hop on over on their Modern Skeptics Instagram, where you can see the discussion taking place. I will be over there on live with them, and we'll discuss this book. And we're actually going to be, just a little side note, we're going to be uploading all of our audios on YouTube as well. So it will not be like a YouTube, like a video podcast. It will just be an audio podcast episode. So for all the YouTube people, I know you all were like, hey, what about us? We got you. Inshallah, we're going to be putting the audios there as well. So you can follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, and all the good stuff.
And leave a review on YouTube, or not a review, comment on YouTube too. So many ways. Again, just let us know what y'all thought. So on that note, thank you very much for having matcha with us today, y'all. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.